aligned to that, including your human resources, your health and safety, and our online training, where we do a lot of coaching and mentoring as well, both online, virtually, and of course, day to day. So just to give you some insight as to ORBRIX, you see that we now have got a new brand, which started off basically in the beginning of March, and that was working smartly and more responsibly since COVID. We wanted to look at all the heroes that are out there, our medical profession, and those of you that are doctors on this platform at the moment, we salute you. You are the heroes that are actually holding things together out there, together with the nurses, together with the cleaners, together with people that are dropping off food to those elderly who can't actually even get to the supermarket. So you do what you do best. And ORBRIX decided to say, hey, hang on, we can't have our face-to-face conferences. We can't have our face-to-face training. So what do we do best? And ladies and gents, this is what we do best. We train, we develop, we work with people, and this is our way of giving back to society to say, what can we do to help develop in times of this particular crisis? So we've started a whole lot of virtual workshops ranging from CBRN programs to radiation protection programs to leadership programs to basics in terms of emotional intelligence of dealing with your own emotional trauma during this time. We also include a lot of panel discussions where you'll be looking forward to a lot of panel experts that are going to be there talking us through CBRN, emergency planning, disaster management, radiation protection, emotional healing, physical healing, and so forth. So watch out for those dates. You should be receiving emails for when we're running those programs. Ladies and gents, again, we want to do what we do best, and we invited the community, and it's amazing how many people responded to say, how we want to be part of these particular sessions. And the moment we knew that we're on the right track, when we started with 5 people and then running to registration of 150 people, we knew that we were on the right process. Watch out for our global summit that should be coming shortly, our virtual summit in terms of CBRN, Emergency Planning Summit. So bear in mind that that is on its way. So keep an eye for that. You should be watching the media in terms of the advertising of that shortly. So welcome to the session. It's a little bit about what I've told you, some of the topics that we included where leaders in the restoration world actually meet. And please watch out for more topics that we'll be following through as well. So just to get started, in terms of the housekeeping, please toggle through on your video cam on and off. We've got Ermal is our technical guy in the background. We'll be welcoming you in silent on the chat as we begin the session. If your mic is unmuted, please make sure that there's no background sound coming through it, or your mobile phones are off. We will try our best to make sure we keep to time. Please ask lots of questions. Dr. Jeff is here, so if you need a question, you're welcome to unmute yourself. There's a speaker token or icon. Please click on it to unmute, or alternatively, you're more than welcome to put it in the chat, and we will make sure that the question gets across to Jeff. If it's a question that he will be covering at a later stage in his presentation, he will park it, and we will then continue with it. And most important, ladies and gents, let's have some fun. Let's really interact and get the best out of these sessions. So we look forward to interacting with you. Jeff, I'm now going to introduce you to our presenter for today, Dr. Jeff, and he will tell you a little bit more about himself. But Dr. Jeff has a PhD. He's in nuclear engineering and a certified professional engineer. As you can see, he has almost 37 years of experience. But apart from that, he's also the author of several international safety standards and guidance documents on emergency management and response of terrorist events. So, ladies and gents, we are in the hands of a very esteemed and professional person who I believe I've built a very good relationship with over the past few months. And we're glad to have Jeff on board as one of our esteemed experts with regards to ORBRIX in UAE. So Jeff, all over to you, and I'm going to hand over the presentation to you. In the meantime, Ermal, if you can open the lines while I'm handing over. We also have Wellington who's saying that he cannot hear. Can you please check on that as well? Jeff, I'll be handing over now to you. Amongst all these names, I just need to get to you, Jeff. Give me 1 second. Armo, have you opened the lines if there's any questions or comments? And I believe that you're seeing to Wellington at the moment. So there we go, Jeff.
Yeah, lines are open.
Jeff, all yours.
All right, can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see.
My screen. Fantastic, excellent, thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, Hawa. After this absolutely glorious introduction, I can only disappoint people. I think we have to next time downscale the introduction a little bit. Good morning.
Well,
good morning,
we say it the way it is, yeah?
Good morning, everyone. I'm really pleased to be with you. I'm also pleased to see that we have a sizable audience today. This is fantastic. If there's any problem during the presentation that we'll be making, I don't see any of the 53 participants in this presentation, in this seminar. So if there's any problem understanding me, I've been muted, for example, just now. So if you happen to lose me because I've moved outside the screen, please do say something, and that will correct the situation. So what we're going to be presenting today is the Incident Command System. Now, I want to start with a question to the audience, and I assume now everybody knows exactly how to raise their hands. Incident Command System, ICS. How many of you live in the country that has implemented ICS? Can you just raise your hands, those who do? And maybe, Hawa, you can tell me how many hands you see raised.
So those of you, there's a hand in a signal on your screen. You're more than welcome to raise it. Alternatively, if for some reason you can't find it, if you are functioning from an iPad or a phone, you're more than welcome to also put it into the chat. Either a yes or a no. It's at the moment, Jeff, we see 2 hands.
2 hands.
3
well,
hands.
there
3 hands.
should
there
should be a lot. Oh, good, good. Good. I think that's let's proceed.
That's
then.
about 8.
I think it's really important to understand that ICS means different things to different people. The Incident Command System has been mandated and mandatory in many countries, and including, of course, the U.S., where the system was born. It has been mandated in some provinces in Canada. It has been mandated in some other countries in the Middle East. But it means different things to different people. So let's be very careful about this. When we talk about Incident Command System, what we're going to present today is the American version, the original version, the one that actually has evolved since the 70s into something that is now considered to be an acceptable international standard. ICS, for example, in the United Kingdom does exist. It's called Incident Command System. But it is a little bit different. Why? Because a lot of countries have said, well, because ICS was invented by the Americans, and some countries a little bit sensitive about the Americans are saying, well, we're going to develop our own. So it has evolved in some countries as a homegrown incident command system, in other countries as a NIMS, or National Incident Management System, in other countries as a NEMS, as a National Emergency Management System. But I think it's really important here to understand where it comes from and what it entails. What is the scope of ICS? And this is an introductory seminar to the actual course, which I will explain later consists of 4 different levels, and which leads to certificates. Now, this seminar today, no certificate, I'm sorry. This is a bit of an introduction, a bit of an appetizer for the actual certificating course, but there's going to be no certificate out of this. I hope it's clear. And if it's not, if some of you were expecting to get certificates out of this, and you decide that because you're not going to get one, you got to leave, I will not take it personally. So let me be absolutely clear on that. So let's move on to the actual course itself. Why are we talking ICS? Because fortune favors the prepared. That's what we pastors said in 1854. And what it means really is that if you are responding to an emergency, a crisis, or an incident without a standardized command system, you're improvising. You're improvising to a level that is likely to undo your response and to greatly diminish its effectiveness. Therefore, we're going to talk about standardizing the command system for response and responding to emergencies. I've never seen a perfect system. I don't think ICS is a perfect system. I think that any system has pros and cons. But by adopting a standard, as we'll see later in this seminar, what we are doing is putting luck on our side. We are actually helping structure the response. There's no perfect system, but I've seen a lot of systems that actually don't work. They don't work because they're overly complicated. They don't work because they're not properly understood, and they don't work because they're not applied in a standard way by all the organizations that have to work together. So let's talk about Incident Command System. Let's look at ICS100, the first level, and let's ask ourselves the question, why is this something that has become so popular over the years and has actually been the basis for many, many incident management systems around the world? The instructor today is not this one. This is my colleague, Paul Butler, but he is one of my key colleagues in the development of this certification course. Paul is a president of Magellan Engineering. It's a CBRN response specialist. He is a certified incident command system instructor at all levels, from level 100 to level 400. He's a chemical specialist with over 25 years experience. He's actually known internationally for his response to chemical and biological emergencies. And he's, for example, conducted high-level threat assessments in Afghanistan. He has been a lead inspector for the UNMOVIC, United Nations team for weapons of mass destruction inspection in Iraq. He was the chemical group's operations officer and acting chief, and he's also a designate for as an inspector for the CTBTO. So this Paul Butler has a lot of experience, and if you happen to choose to take the certification course later on, which will be offered either online or in person, Paul will certainly be one of my colleagues giving that course. Here's me. This is me without the beard. Yes, it is me indeed. That is a confinement beard, and they will last there as long as we are confined. That is my message that is my point making for the confinement period. I, of course, have, as Hawa said, 37 years experience in CBRN, nuclear emergency management. I'm a nuclear specialist. I've also worked in biological emergency crisis management. But what's really important to mention here, I think, is the fact that I've worked in over 20 countries in emergency management. I have seen many crisis management systems. I've seen some that work. I've seen some that don't work. And this is what I want to discuss with you a little bit today and let you know exactly what's going on in respect to this. So the aim of the seminar today, as I said, is to introduce what ICS is. It is an international accepted standard in emergency management. I'm going to introduce the North American version of it, which has been applied in many countries, including in the Gulf. And I want to explain the basis for this, not necessarily to make you experts in the whole system, but at least you understand what it includes. What is ICS exactly? What we're going to cover? Why? Why are we talking about ICS? What is ICS? What is it exactly? There's a lot of misconceptions out there as to what ICS really is. The key principles, and then we'll talk about what the continuing education certification in ICS can be if you choose to go that route. Now, why ICS? Well, it started in 1970 in the US, California, and there was a series of devastating fires that actually completely destroyed the forest and the housing and the communities around Southern California. And what was made obvious during the response to this event is that there was massive confusion amongst multiple response forces. A single response force was not sufficient to deal with this. And by having all of these fire response teams responding and acting on the fires, it was realized that there was mass confusion. Fire equipment, fire engines were deployed in different directions, for example. Some were going south, some were going north without any apparent coordination. command posts were all over the place, and of course they were not coordinated, so there was no effective attack of the fire at that point. They reached a critical level of resources. They didn't have enough, and the ones that they had were not deployed in an optimal way, so they ended up wasting a lot of resources that they did have available. As a result, they ended up with multiple fires. 13 days it lasted. 16 people died. That's not too bad in terms of number of deaths. So those people who've taken the crisis management seminar last week with me will know that some emergencies have killed a lot more people than that. But if you look at the actual destruction, we're talking about 5.5 acres, 500,000 acres. Over 700 structures were destroyed, and $234 million in damages. Now, some people might say 234, that's not too bad. We're talking $1970 here, so it's not quite the same. So, you know, what went wrong in that fire? Well, let me ask you a question first of all. I want to go back to that again, a show of hands, and maybe you can help me on this, Hawa. But the problem here was mass confusion because many agencies were responding to the same emergency without being coordinated. Tell me, amongst the audience, I've seen there's a lot of folks that actually have experience as part of emergency incident response teams. Show of hands, how many of you have experienced this lack of coordination with other agencies when responding to an emergency? Show of hands, please. And Hawa, let me know.
Sure. So currently we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hands thus far.
There should be almost 50 hands because that happens all the time. I've seen it, you've seen it. It is a problem. And we're going to explore a little bit more why that is a problem, what ICS does to try to resolve that. But what went wrong in those fires? There was a lack of accountability. The big thing was nobody seemed to know who was responsible. They didn't seem to know where their resources were. Once they were dispatched, they were kind of lost. It was on their own. It was as far west. It was everybody battling the fire. So lack of accountability, poor communication happened. Everybody was on their own networks. They were talking within their own team, but they didn't talk to the other teams that were playing there. A difference in terminology, and we're going to talk about this a lot more in this seminar. They were actually confused because different people were using different words for the same thing, or the same word meaning different things. And that, of course, created a lot of confusion. Differences in command and control structures and responsibilities. You have some forces that had a fire chief that was responsible for certain aspects. Others had a fire chief that was responsible for slightly different aspects. That creates confusion when you're trying to work together. They had different procedures, different concepts of operation. They didn't have a good planning process. So when they were reacting at the scene of the fires, the actions were not properly planned. So they were actually knee-jerk reacting. They were reacting as opposed to planning an organized and coordinated response. The incident commanders became totally overloaded. And some of you may have seen that in the past. I have seen in emergencies that lasted a long time, incident commanders that were so overloaded and so absorbed by the response to their crisis that they couldn't even say they were tired anymore, and they couldn't even leave anymore. And they started making bad decisions. I've actually seen incident commanders that had to be removed and forced to rest because they did not want to lead. They were overloaded and they did not have the ability to pull themselves out of the crisis or pull their nose out of the dirt. That happened. And there was no method, no procedure, no process, no approach for integrating all of the agency's requirements. That is, in a summary, what happened, what went wrong during those fires in 1970. And that's what led to a project called Fire Scope, the Firefighting Resources of Southern California, organized for potential emergencies in 1972. After analyzing the response to these fires, they said, we've got to do something. We've got to do something about fixing this. We've got to find a way to improve the capabilities of the fire response organizations to respond when they're doing so with other agencies. So the project was essentially divided or focused on 4 fundamental principles. The first one is there has to be commonality and uniformity between responding agencies. That will improve response performance. The information that is shared amongst the agencies must be timely, must be accurate. Everybody needs to have the same situational awareness. The emergency management procedures, the incident management procedures, have to be designed to integrate and support a regional coordination, just a non-scene local coordination, a regional coordination of efforts in order to improve the crisis management performance. And finally, the modern technologies that are available, and they keep changing, they have to be effectively integrated in the fire service or the emergency response agencies. Now, this led to actually two kinds of efforts. One of them was to focus on the policy, and the command and control structure harmonization. That led to something called the multi-agency command and control system, the MACS. And the MACS was actually something that was a good idea, but we didn't see too much after this initial effort. The other one was tactical field operation coordination, and that is what led to the ICS, the Incident Command System. And that one stayed, and it's been with us now for over 50 years. What is ICS? Well, if you look at ICS, you know, and some of you who know about ICS know that there are 5 primary management functions. There's a command function, that's the boss. There's an operations function, those are the people doing the actions, doing the operations. There's a logistics function, and those are the people getting and coordinating resources. There's a planning section or a planning function. Those are the thinkers, the planners, those are develop the approach. And finally, there's a finance administration, and those are the people who pay for the effort, because any of these crises, any of the incidents, of course, will entail large expenses. Now, the beauty of this system, and it appears so simple, the beauty of it is that if every agency is structured along the same 5 primary functions, does it not make it easier to integrate the response? If they all have the same definition for these functions, if they all understand their purpose in the incident the same way, does it not make it a little bit easier to work together? That's the whole point. Now, some of you who have been exposed to Incident Command System have seen this before. That is the standard organization chart for the ICS. You have at the top the incident commander, who is, by the way, supported by a command group right here. That's the information officer, the safety officer responsible for putting in place the measures to coordinate the protection of the staff responding to emergency, and a liaison officer who actually will be liaising to all the different organizations that actually are operating within the ICS. Then what you have is an operations section. I told you that those are the doers. For example, you might have the air operations branch, the people that would actually operate the plants. You have divisions and groups under this. You have the planning sections, the people that actually are developing the approach. It may be the people who are actually looking at the situation, analyzing the situation, developing plans and strategies. It could be also the demobilization unit. A big thing during an emergency, a crisis, an incident, is that you have to think not only about responding, but you have to think about what do we do at the end. It's a little bit like what we're going through right now with COVID. We have been spending the last couple of months thinking about what we do for confinement, but we now are thinking about what we do to deconfine, to remove the lockdown. Same thing in Dubai. Right now, Dubai is thinking about lifting it. That effort, that planning effort starts well before you're actually demobilizing. And that comes within the planning sections. Logistics sections, I will skip over. That's obvious. Those are the people getting the resources, coordinating the resources, tracking the resources, and also ensuring that the proper resources are going to the right place. And finally, the finance section, keeping track of costs across the entire response organization. But ICS is a lot more than that org chart. Now, a lot of you have seen this before. A lot of you may think, oh, that's ICS. However, it's not. ICS is a lot more than a standard org chart, and this is something which has to be conveyed to you, organization. A lot of people saying, we got to go ICS. Yeah, sure, ICS is great, but it's a lot more than this little organization chart that you've seen. ICS is also a bunch of processes, standards, standard procedures, standard approaches to doing a number of things. And what we're going to spend the rest of this seminar doing is talking about those 14 key principles and features of what Incident Command System is. But before I proceed, can I ask anyone, if you have any pressing questions, please let us know. just do a little chat there, and anything so far?
So I will unmute everyone just to get sure. If there are any questions, please, you are unmuted. You're more than welcome to say hi, hello, and let us know what your question or comment is. Or you can put it into the chat. All right, Jeff, I think nobody's taking you on that. If there's anything, please put it in the chat and I'll raise it with Jeff as we move along. Thank you, ladies and gents.
All right, let's move on. 14 key principles. And
Arnold, if you can do a mute.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Thank you very much. So let's talk about those 14 key principles and features. And I think, I'm hoping that will be that will give you a real taste of what ICS is all about.
Just before you proceed, we have a question from Ali, and how ICS applied in aircraft rescue and firefighting.
What's the question again?
How ICS applied in aircraft rescue and firefighting.
We're going to talk about this a little bit. ICS started as a firefighting response organizational structure, and then it became, over time, something that is for all hazards. It's much more than just firefighting. And we're going to talk about some of the problems of ICS as well, but I'll explain to you how it applies in the 14 principles. Is that okay?
Perfect. The question is from Mr. Ahmed Fayaz. Thanks, Mr. Ahmed.
All right, so let's talk about this. First of all, the very first really key principle of ICS, and it's going to sound maybe a little bit simple to some of you, is using common standard terminology. A standard terminology for organizational functions, incident facilities, resource descriptions, position titles. And ICS promotes the use of plain language or clear text. No jargons, no codes, no insider information. I'll give you some examples. I used to work for an organization where we did a lot of massive exercises, and if something happened during the exercise, and all of a sudden it was no longer an exercise, we had a real emergency within an emergency exercise, we used to call it no duff. Does that mean anything to any one of you? If I say no duff, who understands? Maybe one, maybe two, maybe three people. The other one that I like to use is, a lot of you may be familiar with ham radio operations. Yes, it's a military term. Exactly, Derek. It's exactly what it is. The organization I was talking about is, in fact, the military, in which I spent 13 years. Those of you who are familiar with ham radio operations, 10-4, Roger. If I see 10-4 to you, how many people understand that? If I say Roger, most people probably will know what I'm talking. But you might recall a movie that was actually called Airplane, if I'm not mistaken, where there was a bit of a joke made about Roger in the cockpit. Roger, Roger. This kind of jargon actually leads to confusion if you're working with organizations that actually don't share the same jargon. But mainly also, one of the big issues is that you might be dealing with international organizations. In the Gulf, you have, for example, a regional response plan for oil spills. You have one for nuclear emergencies. And what if you have to work with other countries, but they don't use the same, they use the same language, but not the same jargon? That can create confusion. So ICS is, that's the end of this. We don't use this kind of terminology. We use common terminology. Here's an example. A tanker. What's a tanker? Well, a tanker could be a fire truck. A tanker can be a railroad car. It carries liquids. It can be a ship. It can be an aircraft, and it can be a truck carrying fuel. So if I say a tanker is a tanker, which one is it? I don't know. So the bottom line is we don't use this kind of terminology. We use simple terminology. So, for example, when we talk about a chief in ICS, we know exactly what we mean. When we talk about a director or a supervisor, we know exactly what we mean. You folks come from organizations where you have directors, maybe director general, supervisors. You may have chiefs as well. I'll bet you that from one organization to the other, chief doesn't mean the same thing. In some organizations, the chief may be very, very high. In some organizations, the chief may be very, very low. Under ICS, chief means the same thing across the board. The second principle is very important, although again, it sounds very simple. It's establishing command. Command is the act of directing and controlling by virtue of your authority, whether it is statutory, regulatory, or delegated. And the big question is who's in charge? I like to bring up this example. In 1998, when Swiss Air 11 went down, I remember I was at the scene. I had just trained the military response forces for this kind of incident, and they actually got dispatched as soon as I finished the test on the course, and they ended up having over 200 response organizations at the Swiss Air 111 at the site, trying to recover the plane, the bodies, trying to find out what was going on, the black box. And I recall distinctly that every organization said they were in charge. It was not clear at all who was in command, who was commanding these organizations. That was massive confusion. So in the ICS system and in the Incident Command System, what we do is stipulate exactly what and how command structure is established, communicated, and transferred. It's also important to transfer command because all incidents don't start as being incidents. Sometimes they can start as local incidents, and it's important at some point to evolve into a different command structure, and therefore command will change. So establishing command, maintaining command, and transferring command is something that the Incident Command System describes very well, and we have to stick to that. Here's another one. I like this one, chain of command, or what will be referred to as the unity of command principle. That means that there has to be, and there must be, a clear line of authority within the organization. Unity of command means something very clear. It means that personnel report only to one supervisor, and they only receive work instructions from that supervisor. That is absolutely key. Now, some people are probably snickering back there going like, of course, that's the way it should be. How many of you have been working for organizations where you have two bosses? Any one of you who's worked within the matrix organization, you know that sometimes we say, well, it's matrix organization, so you're functionally responsible for this one, but administratively responsible for this other one. I have seen many examples where I've seen people working in South America receiving orders from Central America boss, but having to report to a boss that was located in West Africa. This kind of thing actually creates confusion and it creates conflicts. So under ICS, there has to be unity of command. Only one boss, only one person giving you instructions. That is not the same as unified command. Unity of command is what I just described. Unified command is this. What is unified command? When you have a lot of organizations working together, when they all have the same structures, when they all use the same 5 main response functions, management functions that I described before, they can be properly integrated, and they can share a common set of incident objectives and strategies that are established through something called unified command, where the commanders or the incident commanders of all these organizations form a group. They actually work together, they make decisions together, but again, there's only one boss, there's only one incident commander, but it could be a unified command. That means they work together. Okay, it allows joint decision making. It's not one organization imposing its wills on the other organizations. You see that a lot. For example, if you have an incident that leads a security incident, for example, or even in the air, someone was talking about air transport incident. If you have an air transport incident that involves the security dimension, that's a good example. Normally, the Transportation Safety Board might be the one who actually has the overall authority to start with. But because there's a security component, you might have your national police or your intelligence involved in deciding that they want to take command of the whole situation. In traditional emergency response organizations, the police would come in, take over, and say, that's it, we're in charge, you listen to what we have to do. Under unified command, they have to work together. And yes, we've got some comments here, people who've actually gone through this. It happens. So unified command means we're commanding together. There's always a person in charge. There's always a chief. There's always an incident commander. A unified command allows organizations to merge together so that the operations section or the operations branch of, say, the air civil aviation organization can work together with the operations branch of the national police organization, because they share the same goal, they share the same structure, and they have responsibilities that are fairly similar, and that they can work together that way. And that maintains unity of command. That is unified command. It is not the same as unity of command. Unity of command is one person, one boss, one set of instructions, and unified command means we work together and we integrate the organizations so that we can make joint decisions. Under ICS, we also manage by objectives. This is really important to understand, because it's not just a set of procedures that say, well, this is the way you do things. We have to establish what the objectives of the response are. Now, a lot of people who have known Napoleon Bonaparte, and I was a little bit too young when he was alive, said that one of the brilliant features of his leadership is why not voice? We have a comment here. Why not voice? I'm not sure. Oh, okay. So we have Mohammed who cannot hear. So maybe we can fix that, Hawa. Can you hear?
Yeah. So we can all hear you. So we'll sort that out. No issues.
All right. So Napoleon used to manage by objectives. What he would say, gather his top generals and colonels and say, well, here's the objective. This is what we want to achieve. Do we all understand that? If we all understand it, how we do it is up to you. Now, to a certain extent, there are some bounds to that. But the bottom line is, you say to, he used to say to generals, this is what the target is, what the objective is. It's up to you, because you know your resources better than I do. It's up to you to determine what the best way to achieve that is. Under Incident Command System, that's how we manage. We manage by objectives. It's based on the overall priorities. We're telling people what they're going to achieve, not necessarily how they're going to be achieved. And we make it specific and measurable, so we can actually measure the degree of success of certain operations. And also, objectives are communicated throughout the entire ICS, the Incident Command structure, and it is done through the Incident Action Plan, which we'll see in a moment. That is really important, because how many of you, ask yourself the question, who have responded sometimes to emergencies or crises or complicated situations? Sometimes you work in your little corner and you go like, I'm not sure why I'm doing this. I'm not sure where I fit in this overall response, and I'm not sure what the organizational targets are here. So this is a really important thing to set and to communicate, and it helps the entire organization respond in unison. The next thing is an incident action plan. Again, something that sounds absolutely obvious, but every incident must have an incident action plan. Under ICS, that is mandatory. And in the incident action plan, it includes the incident objectives, the activities that have to be completed, the aims, the goals, the time frame, and what the operational period is. How often are we going to check the progress of this incident action plan? This is really important, because in many cases, incident action plans are established verbally, communicated verbally, and that's it. Under ICS, we do this in writing. It has to be done in writing. Why? For many reasons. First of all, if it's verbal, there can be misinterpretation on the part of some organizations. Remember, ICS is perfect for a very, very large response scope involving multi-agencies. If you don't write it down, there will be misinterpretation. That's the old telephone game where someone says something to the other one, who repeats it to the other one, who repeats the other one, and in the end, the message gets completely transformed. Also, there has to be shift changes for long emergencies. When you change the shift, if you don't have a written plan, there could be a disconnect between the previous shift and the one that's taking charge now. And finally, there's something that is unfortunately a reality, and I think it's reality in every country, although in some countries more than others, is that there's a legal aspect. There's a legal aspect to doing what you're doing, and you know that after the crisis, there's going to be an investigation. There's going to be some people that are going to be blamed. There's going to be a lot of blaming after the emergency, and I think we're going to see the same thing after COVID-19. That is why it's so important to document what you say you're going to do and to document what you've done about it. Okay? Let's move on to another feature number 7 of the ICS. The ICS offers a modular organization. Now, not every emergency is the same as the previous one. They all change. If we're talking about an air base or a transport emergency, it's not the same as a fire fighting emergency. It's not the same as a nuclear emergency, and it's certainly not the same as a terrorist attack. But the structure of ICS allows responding to all of these incidents by being flexible and by allowing the positions, the branches, the teams on the Incident Command System organization structure to be staffed as needed. Also, you may have a very small emergency that starts with a truck accident carrying benzene or carrying ethanol or carrying chlorine, for example. It could start as a very small emergency initially, but it has to be staffed up as the emergency becomes more complicated. So what ICS recognizes that not necessarily all functions are going to be filled, not necessarily all blocks within the organization charge are going to have someone, but what's really important is that if there's a block that's activated, there has to be a person in charge. That's clear. Right? So one person in charge, no matter what you activate, but not all of them have to be activated. So only functions that are necessary are filled. Clear? Number 8, I like this one. I'm going to do a little test on this one. Manageable span of control. That means that ICS essentially gives guidance on how many people, how many branches, how many teams you should be supervising. How many individuals or how many teams can be effectively managed during an incident? Of course, it depends on the type of accident. It depends on the nature of the task. It depends on the hazards, of course, and it depends on the distances between various personnel. But let me ask you a question, and this is what I want to find out from the audience. The question is, what do you think is the optimal number of people that a person can manage? And by that, it could be persons or it can be units. For example, you may have units of X number of people managed by one person, and then and Y number of units managed by another one. So how many people do you think is the optimal number? I'm going to give you some choices. Is it 5? Is it 15? Or is it 30? Derek says 5. We have a lot of answers say 5 to 7. We got any more? 5, 15, or 30? Excellent.
Most are saying 5.
I think that a lot of you have taken this course before, you've read up on it, because that's exactly what it is, between 3 and 7. Less than 3 is not effective. More than 7, it becomes a bit overwhelming. Optimally, 5. Optimally, 5. But of course, it depends. If you're working with people in very high hazardous environment, it may be closer to 3. If you're working with a very menial task that are simply administrative support, it could be a little bit more than 7. But optimally, it should be 5. In emergency situations, managing more than 5 people is difficult. It is why any of you who has military experience will find that a section is usually about 10 people or 9 people managed by 2 people, usually a section head and deputy. There are 3 sections in the platoon. That means 3 people, and there are 3 platoons in one company. So this is a number that is not. This was not invented by ICS. It is something that comes from experience. Any more than 7 people becomes difficult to manage, especially in an emergency. We're talking about crisis here, incidents. We're not talking about normal administrative tasks. That's really important to understand. One of the big things that ICS tries to resolve also is the resource management. As we saw in the first few slides, in the 1970 fire in Southern California, there was a problem with resource management. I think we're seeing the same thing now. I mean, think about it. We've got COVID-19 going on right now. How many countries or organizations or departments or provinces within countries do you know are lacking things like ventilators? And how many countries do you know have surpluses in ventilators? Are they properly managed? In the end, it turns out that it's not so bad, but initially it was an absolute disaster. So managing resources to fit the crisis is really important. And under ICS, you will find processes for categorizing resources ordering resources, dispatching, tracking, recovering, and of course, paying for them. So this is a process that is an inherent part of Incident Command System. You see on the right something called T cards. T cards have different color codes depending on what their status is, and it's assigned to various resources. It might interest you to know that this system actually was inspired from a French system that was observed by the Americans when they were helping the European forces in the First World War. It's a system that is bloody simple. Initially, it was on paper. Now, of course, it's all done through electronic means. But it is a system that actually works. It's so simple that it works. Hey, by the way, small comment on my part. Anything that is too complicated is unlikely to work. It has to remain simple to work. It has to be obviously and ideally something that you use not just during an emergency, but also during your normal work routine.
Good. Jeff, can you take one question? We have a question from Mabusa.
Absolutely. Please.
So a question from Mabusa is, what is the best reply to give to a supervisor or leader at a scene who flouts or disregards ICS protocol by giving orders out of line with expectations?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think the question is, what do you do when you disagree with your boss's order? And this is tough one. It's not just ICS, by the way. It's any command and control structure you have in place. If your boss says something to you that you don't agree with, what do you do about it? There's no easy answer, and it depends on the situation. If you think that the decision will put you in an ethically unacceptable position, then I think that the common wisdom is you need to say something about it. If you think that the decision will lead to a short-term and urgent disaster or negative impact, then you need to say something about it. But you need to say it in such a way that you can be convincing in your argument. If, on the other hand, the decision is something that might be benign, it has no immediate impact, and it is perceived by the emergency commander or by the person giving you the order to be something that's absolutely urgent, then you just bloody do it. And after that, you come back and you say, listen, we need to assess the impact of that. So the situation is very difficult. We always say in a time of crisis, it is not time to start pulling out your philosophy books and start arguing about philosophy during the emergency. You need to carry out the order in order to make it effective. Sometimes commanders will have a different view than you have because it's more global. So you may disagree with it because you don't have the full picture. So it's very delicate to say, I'm not going to obey that order, even if you don't agree with it. The question is, why do you not agree with it? Okay, so no simple answer on this one. Okay. Let's move back to locations and facility. Under ICS, there is a code for each facility, each type of facility. It's a commonly used code. It's visual, it's GIS based, and it is shared by all the organizations. So if you see these symbols, all of these symbols, whether it's a base, a camp, what does a camp mean, heli spot or heli base, all of these things are commonly shared by all the organizations. So if you look at the map and you see this, it means the same thing no matter which map you're looking at. And that's one of the features of Incident Command System. Integrated communication is a really important one because in the past, it used to be that a lot of organizations didn't work on the same network as the sister organizations. For example, think about your own situation. How many of you have police networks that are shared by the, say, EMT network? I've seen many countries where the police, when they respond to the scene, when they're talking on their radios, they're talking to themselves. The EMTs talk to themselves. The hospital or the other forces talk. The firefighters also talk to themselves. And the way to talk to each other was to initially go through a dispatcher who would actually pass on the message or connect you with the other people. There was a project in Europe, and in particular in the Netherlands, about 10, 15 years ago, called C2000, which aimed at resolving that by integrating all of the networks into one secure network that would actually work for all the forces. That's a really important thing to do. Communication systems have to be planned. The resources that they use have to be planned. You have to know how you can talk to other organizations. Otherwise, it makes your coordination essentially wasteful. Information and intelligence management. I like to call it also situational awareness. This one is really important because one of the biggest issues when agencies work together is having the same image of what is actually happening. I call it a common situational awareness. You cannot do that unless you share the same information in real time. I've seen so many examples of people, organizations responding to information that might have been half an hour old. Imagine if you have an organization within your interagency response that is responding to something that is 30 minutes old because they don't have information that is current and could be critical. They could actually work against the other organizations. So we have a question from Campbell. Oh, I have to look at
There's 2 or 3 questions.
We have 3 questions.
Yeah, so
okay.
if I can go with the question. Okay, so let's go with the first one. We have one from question from Sinto. What can we do with the fast turnover of trained ICS staff?
Yeah. You mean the turnover in normal organization, or the turnover during an incident? Because those are 2 different things. If we're talking about the high turnover in an organization of trained ICS personnel, that means you need to have a training program in place for all new personnel joining the organization, and you need to quickly ramp them up to the appropriate ICS level. We'll talk about the ICS level in a few minutes. If you're talking about the turnover or the changeover during an incident, then the changeover is a change of command. It's a turnover. It's a process that is well documented, and it is well implemented in accordance with the ICS procedures and its standard operating procedures. So that process of turning over is something that is inherent in the incident command structure and has to be properly followed. Everything I've talked about before in terms of the incident action plan, for example, is part of the turnover. So there are 2. The question depends. The answer depends on what the question was actually meant to mean. We have a question from. Okay, so that was from yeah. We have a question from also from Sharizan. So where can we put the symbol? The symbol goes on the location where the on the map where that unit is located. It's that simple. If there's, I think it's clear. If it's not, I'll explain it a bit more. We have also a question from Kembo saying, how would you hand over the duty of incident commander when a senior high rank comes? Interesting question. It is a good question. When the crisis escalates, there is a need to involve increasingly more senior individuals in the at the site. When that happens, you might have the captain of a firefighting unit, for example, who's initially in charge. All of a sudden, you've got 3, 4, 5, 10 units responding to the emergency. Now you need to have a regional commander for those units. It may no longer be that captain. It may still be that captain, but it may no longer be. That process has to be documented. In other words, when in your plans, your procedures, if you're consistent with the incident command system, you will actually stipulate exactly at what point that has to be turned over and how. Now, if a senior officer comes to the scene and goes to you, and you're the senior officer at the time at the scene and says, I'm more senior than you, I'm taking over. If it is not done in accordance with the protocol that is explained or that is described in your plan and the incident command system, it is not considered acceptable. I'll give you one example. We talked about it last week. There is one country, I won't say which one, that has actually got a little bit tired of the fact that the very senior officials in the government were never trained because they never had time. But when there was an emergency, always came in and said, I'm the boss, so I'm taking charge. So they actually instituted a system, a policy that was signed by the ministers that said, unless you've been trained, you can't come into emergency response center and you cannot take over. So you might have a senior government official that comes in and you're a middle manager, but you are in the books as being the person in charge. And that person might come in and say, I want to take over because I'm more senior than you. If he or she has not been trained, they don't even walk in the emergency response center. So again, it's a simple question. The answer is not so simple because you know what? The Indians are the chiefs of the chiefs, whether it's in war or in peace, and that is something that has to be recognized. How do you deal with it? You only deal with it through a very proper incident management culture in your organization. I hope that answers the question. Do we have any more?
I think most of them are saying yes, it has answered the question. There is one or two more. Mabusa, I think, has a comment, which a few people are agreeing with. Perhaps the most important people to understand the ICS are the various leaders of organizations for ICS. And of course, to be fully effective and functional. That's apparently his view. Mohammed Sharizal has agreed with Mabusa. Ali is taking a good chance there to try and identify which country it is, and I don't think we're going to answer that. But Gunter Puben is saying in Austria, the incident command will remain responsible even if senior officers approach on site. That's coming from Gunter.
Gunter is absolutely right. Unless there's been a protocol to actually overtake responsibilities from the incident commander, that person who was the incident commander stays in charge. Now, it could be, even in Austria, that at some point it escalates to national level, and then you may introduce something a little bit different. In the UK, they have something called the bronze, silver, and gold level commanders. And within each of these incident command levels, there is another structure present. But that could happen. But it depends. Every country is a little bit different that way. And I appreciate the comment by Günther. It is the incident commander is nominated, designated, remains in charge, and nobody has the power to say, well, move, I'm more senior than you. So,
all right.
Very good question, very good discussion.
We're just about reaching our time. So what I'll do is, if we can keep the last few questions you might have just for last. I'm sure Jeff would like to finalize his presentation, if you can allow him a few minutes, and then we'll take all your questions thereafter in case people needs to leave. Thanks, Jeff.
We're almost done, actually. This is number 12, and we have to go up to number 14. So I'll move on there. There's no problem at all. Information and intelligence management. I talked about sharing situational awareness. In the old days, that was hampered by communication systems. Nowadays, because we have secure email-based, web-based, or land-based, WAN-based system, it is something that's a lot easier, but it's still not easy. Situational awareness and having the same is something that needs to be achieved as part of the ICS. Accountability is protecting your people. That's what it means. It's a system to track, account, and control the location, function, welfare of all your personnel. And you do that through check-in. You do that through the incident action plan. That says where they're going. You do that also through unity of command. Because there's unity of command and because there's only one person who's giving you orders, you're not in the risk of doing something that someone doesn't know you're doing. So this is very important. Span of control, again, because you're not overwhelmed in terms of number of people that you manage. You're better able to keep track of where your people are. And resource tracking is an important component of Incident Command System. And finally, the resource management system. For all the resources that will support the response, under ICS, you will have one centralized point for ordering resources, for controlling resources, for dispatching resources, and it will be dispatched with a strategy that is actually in line with what you're trying to achieve as a full response organization. This is what we're trying to avoid. We don't want to have spontaneous development because someone says, I need that right away. It has to be well organized, and under ICS, it's done through the resource management system. So in summary, very quickly, ICS is a standardized system. It provides structure, flexibility, consistency, really important, consistency, and adaptability for managing escalating incidents. Number two, ICS is based on 5 key management functions. I think everybody knows these 5 key management functions by now. If you've seen anything about ICS, that's what you've seen. But ICS is a lot more than that. It's a lot more than org chart. ICS is those 14 key elements and processes, and they provide standard processes and procedures for all key functions. Doesn't matter what organization you work for, doesn't matter what agency, there is consistency between these agencies. Now, this is a very quick view of the ICS100 level course. The actual course takes 4 hours, 4 to 6, depending on discussion and questions. And it contains these various, we call them units. First one is the course overview, ICS overview, which obviously you've had a little bit, but there's more. Under Unit 3, we cover the basic features of ICS. And then we cover the incident commander and staff functions, the command staff functions. Then we talk about the general staff functions, and we actually point out the fact that they're the same no matter what agency you work for. Then we talk about the ICS facilities, the common responsibilities, really important because that's what makes ICS what it is. And finally, we summarize the course. That's the course. It will be offered 4 to 6 hours, and that one will lead to a certificate. That's a certification course. Now, there are different levels of ICS education, if you wish. There are 4 basic levels. 100 is the one we just described. 200 is the basic ICS. It goes a lot deeper into the organization, the processes, and for single resources and for the initial actions in response to incidents. That one is a little bit longer. It's 14 hours. So depending on how it's done, whether it's done 2 hours a day, it could be 7 days. It could be done in a classroom environment. In which case, it can be done in 2 days. Level 300 is intermediate ICS, really important for those people that will have supervisory functions within the ICS. And they're really important for the expanding incidents, those that actually start small and become bigger and bigger. That one is a bit longer as well, 17 hours. And those, by the way, those timings are indicative. It depends a lot on the interaction, but that's basically what we plan for. And finally, this ICS100, it's actually only 14 hours, but it's for command and general staff. So this is at the top level. It's at the strategic level course. All of these courses involve a test, and all of those provide an official certificate by the organization that is sponsoring the ICS. In our case, we're sponsoring, it's ICS Canada that's sponsoring these courses. So you would have a certificate from ICS Canada, the organization. And that's it. I thank you so much for your attention. I hope that the interaction wasn't too quick. I apologize if it was, but and I hope you got something out of it. So thank you very much, and I wish you all the success. I'm open to questions if we have time and if you are so interested.
Jeff, thank you very much. I think that was very informative. We've had a few interactive discussions. I'm going to open up the lines just for those who would like to stay behind and ask 1 or 2 questions. I'm sure Jeff will open that up for you. Those of you that need to leave, we just want to say thank you very much. I know you have many other meetings that you need to get into. We'd like to thank you on behalf of ORBRIX for actually joining us here today. And you should be receiving an email for all our complimentary workshops that we'll be running over the next few weeks, but also you will get more information about the training program specifically that Jeff has spoken to you today about. And I trust engagement from you, and we look forward to engaging with you. Jeff, on behalf of ORBRIX, we'd like to thank you. Armel, if we can open up all the lines just to make sure that if there's any questions or comments, then people can even ask them directly.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Any questions? Any comments?
Actually, there was two questions. It went above, so if you can go back, and I'm gonna read it.
Thanks,
Jeff. Ahmed Nasir is asking, all courses are online. So Jeff, you want to answer that question?
Right now we're offering some of the courses online, not all of them. And over time, they will be offered at the academy, at the training academy that is managed by Hawa.
So at the moment, yes, because of the situation we are all in, we don't want to stop what we are doing, and therefore we'll be running a lot of virtual training. So watch out for those dates and times of when that courses will be running. But other than that, it will be run under the ORBRIX Academy in association with the Gulf Center for Aviation Studies as well. So watch out for that. It will be centralized here in the UAE where we'll be running programs. But of course, if you have a group of people, we're more than happy to be able to fly out to you.
Yeah, the question on COVID-19, any concession for online courses? Exactly, that's what Hawa said. We're doing everything we can online. The ICS100 level is very easy to give online. We will make this one available online even beyond COVID-19 crisis confinement.
And yes, there will definitely be concessions, of course, because the costs are limited. So we will definitely look at that compared to a face-to-face training program. With regards to, can you send the dates? Yes, we will be able to send those dates. Any other questions? And by the way, watch out for our panel discussions that we'll be having soon, and also our summit, our CBRN summit, which will be coming up soon as well. It's going to work around the learnings around COVID-19. So watch out for that as well.
There's a question from Centaur. It's asking, are there any organization who supports in any way institution with highly trained ICS personnel but lacks appropriate supplies or equipment?
Well, there are no provisions as part of ICS. Provisions for the supplementing the equipment that is available is something that needs to be looked at either regionally or nationally. For example, if we're looking at some of the Gulf countries, there may be provisions, two kinds of provisions. One is to actually get assistance in the preparation of resources. The other one is there's a regional plan for provision of assistance in case of something that affects one or several of the Gulf states. But in terms of, there's no ICS organization that actually will get involved in providing relief resources.
All right, I hope that answers the question. And there is one more from Muhammad Sherizal. He's asking how to involve ICS education.
How to
involve? I guess he's
how
going
to get involved in ICS education.
Yes.
Well, the best thing to do is to look at the emails that Hawa and the schedule that Hawa will be setting up in terms of education, of certification. We will be offering all 4 levels. So over time, it will be possible through the academy to get certified in levels 100 to 400.
Absolutely. So for those of you inquiring about the presentation, the video link will be available to all of you. You should be able to have a video link of this particular webinar. We try not to send out any material to people at this particular stage. We would rather encourage you to be able to either watch the video again or alternatively to attend any of the programs. So contact us for further information if possible. And we'll be quite willing to be able to assist and guide you from there. As far as the certificate is concerned, yes, definitely after you complete the entire program that Jeff just spoke to you about, it will be certified, as he's mentioned, based on the level that you will be going through, whether it's ICS100, 200, 300, or 400, and that will be certified. Ernest, thank you very much. I am interested in your CBRN Academy. Absolutely, Ernest. We'll definitely keep in touch with you. Admiral is going to make a copy of all this chat. Admiral, you will make a copy of it so that we can then follow up with each of these comments as well. In your opinion, what is the best way, Ahmed?
Best way to what?
Ahmed, yeah, Ahmed, if you can clarify, you're welcome to unmute yourself. And if you want to clarify best way in what, Ahmed? Right, Mr. Ahmed Nasir, I've unmuted.
Wait, I'm right. I'm
Yes.
writing the question.
Okay, good. All right. While we're waiting for you to write that, Musa, any plans to train leaders of emergency responders? Absolutely. Jeff, if you want to take that question.
Yeah, there's a question from Musa there. The question is, any plans to train leaders of emergency responders on ICS? This is something that has to be determined nationally. If in your country there is a desire or a policy to adopt ICS, then there has to be a training program that comes with it. We'd be absolutely happy and available to help develop the training program and implement that training program in your country. We can do that. But ICS cannot impose, the ICS organization, there are several ICS organizations, it cannot impose itself on the country. I'll give you some examples. I know some countries where they said, no, ICS, no, we don't want ICS. I mentioned the UK before. The UK has this, they have an ICS, but they make a point of saying their ICS has been un-Americanized. But essentially, it's the basic same principles. Once you decide you're going to go ICS or any other system, you need to put in place a training program to do that and to train your leaders. And I would be more than happy with working with the training academy to implement that in your home country or home organization.
Absolutely. So please get in touch with us, give us the details of where you're actually situated, and we'll be able to advise you in terms of what the best possible way forward and check in terms of what the country requirements are as well. Mr. Ahmed Nazir, so in your opinion, what is the best way transferring commanding to senior officer when he arrived on site? Mr. Ahmed Nazir, I see this is a very burning question for you. So Jeff, any comments?
Yeah, the process is well outlined in the Incident Command System structure. But I mean, from a practical point of view, having done this several times myself, the person, there has to be a bit of an overlap. So when a person comes over, assuming and that the person is the authorized commander to take over, there has to be a turnover. You don't just come in and then say, thank you very much, it's over to you and I'm going. There has to be a well-structured briefing that takes place at that point. The briefing might take between 15 minutes and half an hour, depending on the severity, complexity of the crisis. And that briefing has to cover what's happened, what is new, what are the IAP, the incident action plans in place, what is the status of the plans, what are the priorities for the following what we call the business cycle or the operational cycle. What are the issues that we have to deal with immediately? And then at some point, you need to confirm that this has been well understood. There has to be questions. And at some point, you say, are you okay? And then the new commander will come in and say, yes, I now have command. That's clear. And then once they have command, you as an incident commander or the outgoing incident commander can stay a little bit, but you no longer take over and you leave. It is obviously better if you don't turn over the entire organization at the same time. If you turn over all of the organizations, all of the general staff, all of the supervisors and the branch chiefs, you risk creating discontinuity in the response. So normally what you would do is stagger the turnover, but make sure that you don't have shifts that last a number of hours. 8 hours is too short in emergency, but 18 hours might be a little too long. So somewhere in between, you have to know exactly at what point is a good time to turn over. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. I see there's just a comment from Derek. This should happen on shift change over also if the incident goes on for many hours or even days. Derek, we just want to thank you. Your interaction has been phenomenal as well. Thank you for participating with us as well.
Thank you, Derek. In fact, that's I think I covered that in my response. But yeah, absolutely right. This is the same thing that happens at any shift turnover.
Good. Well done, ladies and gents. If I have missed any questions, please, if you can just notify and let me know in the chat box. But I think, Jeff, we have covered most of them already. If there aren't any questions now, we slowly will be closing off the session. We just would like to thank all of you for your time, your effort. Watch out for all those emails that will come through regarding all the training programs we'll be running, and also some of our complimentary sessions that will be taking place over the next few weeks, especially our panel discussions in association with various organizations, which we will reveal over the next few days. So please watch out for that, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much, Derek. Thank you, Ahmed Nizar, for all your participation, and the rest of the people who have participated and been here with us today. And a special thank you, Jeff, for your time and your effort, and we look forward to our next session again. All the best, everyone, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you very much, everyone. Success.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Absolutely, Mr. Mohammed Shahrizal, you will receive the invites. Thank you, Julie. And when they say people leave with the bang, well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Shukran.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Shukran.
John and Hawa, thank you very much for the course, for the extremely informative session. It was a pleasure to be a part of it. It's my first time to actually be involved in a conference per se. We're on the ground, we're considered essential employees. So this whole social distancing thing, unfortunately, doesn't apply on us, or actually, fortunately, it doesn't apply to us, because if I was quarantined, I think I'd lose my mind. So it's nice to be out and about and with people. I'd like to be a part of your future programs as well, and I will be sure to keep in touch with you, Hawa, and you, John, if the opportunity presents itself in the future. I'll be signing out now, and wanted to extend my thanks and hope to get in touch soon.
Shukran,
Thank you so
Mr.
much.
Ali. Thank you very much for the kind words, and we salute you for being one of those essential workers. Thank you very much, and we're glad that you are able to do what you're doing best, and this is one of the reasons we've joined up here. So thank you very much. We will definitely keep in touch.